What if I told you that a small, landlocked country, once ignored, once dismissed, just signed a nuclear energy deal without asking for permission from the West? What if I told you that while Africa bleeds gold and oil into foreign pockets, one leader stood up and said, "No more"? And what if that leader, a young soldier named Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has already begun rewriting the future not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire African continent? This is not fiction. This is not hope. This is real, and it's happening now. Because for decades, we've heard the same tired story, that African nations must wait, that they must borrow, that they must accept help wrapped in chains. But what happens when one man walks into the room and refuses to kneel? Captain Traoré didn't rise to build palaces or make promises. He rose to build roads, hospitals, factories. He rose to electrify his people, not just with power, but with pride. He rose to return the wealth of the land to the hands that work it. So today, we'll walk through 10 mega projects now underway in Burkina Faso. We're talking nuclear energy, gold sovereignty, cement independence, and electric cars. All driven by one idea: Africa deserves more than survival. Africa deserves control. And stay with us, because this isn't just another story. It's the future our ancestors dreamed of. Subscribe now, not just for a video, but for a vision. A continent rebuilt block by black hands on black land. For generations, Burkina Faso lived in the shadows of energy poverty, in villages where candles outlasted bulbs, and cities where electricity came in flashes, not flows. The people of Burkina Faso were told to wait, to depend, to accept. But in June 2025, something changed. A document was signed. A flag was raised. And history, quietly but irrevocably, turned its page. On June 21st, under the West African sun, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the same young soldier once doubted by media across the globe, signed a definitive agreement with Russia. Not for weapons, not for loans, but for nuclear energy. And not just any energy. Africa's first indigenous nuclear power plant, built by Africans, for Africans, and controlled not from Paris or Washington, but from Ouagadougou. This wasn't a gesture. This was a declaration. The partnership, forged with Russia's Rosatom, outlines a 5-year construction plan for a reactor that will not only power homes but industries, schools, hospitals, and eventually nations beyond its borders. For the first time, Burkina Faso wasn't asking for electricity, it was generating it. Captain Ibrahim's latest news covered the event with pride. Traoré wasn't just shaking hands, he was shaking paradigms. Alongside Rosatom CEO Alexei Likhachev and Minister Yakuba Zabri Guba, he laid the foundation for a dream long deferred, a continent no longer held hostage by diesel shortages, power blackouts, or Western-controlled grids. But the nuclear deal is just the headline. The real revolution began earlier, in August 2024, when Traoré established the Burkina Atomic Energy Agency. Quietly, methodically, it started outlining a national policy, defining how atomic power would fuel industrialization, how engineers would be trained, how safety would be upheld, and how public trust would be earned. Remember, this is a nation where only 21% of the population had regular access to electricity. 21. Out of every 5 children, 4 studied under flickering lamps or none at all. Factories stalled. Cold chains broke. Medicine spoiled. Opportunity evaporated. And still, the world called it normal. Traoré called it unacceptable. That's why this nuclear initiative isn't just about electrons. It's about emancipation. Energy is the backbone of modern life. Without it, you cannot produce, cannot store, cannot grow. And the West knows this. That's why control over African energy has always come with contracts written in another language, with conditions hidden in the fine print. But what happens when we write our own conditions? Burkina Faso's nuclear vision extends beyond borders. It aims to power the entire alliance of Sahel states, Mali, Niger, and others in the Confederation that have chosen to walk away from colonial entanglements. This reactor, once operational, could serve as the industrial heart of a new regional order, free from imported fuel and free from imported fear. Technology transfer is at the core of the Rosatom deal. That means African scientists won't just receive equipment, they'll build it. Young engineers from Burkina Faso will train in reactor physics, turbine systems, waste management, and more. Universities are already preparing new courses. Technical schools are revising curricula. And slowly, deliberately, a new class of black nuclear experts is rising. This is how you break a cycle. Not by marching alone, but by mastering the machine. Western media, predictably, scoffed. They called it too ambitious. They asked, can a poor country run a reactor? But that's the same voice that once told us Africans couldn't fly planes, run banks, or write constitutions. And yet, we did. So now we ask, why not nuclear? Why shouldn't African children grow up with lights that never flicker? Why shouldn't farmers store produce in cold chains they build? Why shouldn't our cities glow, not from imported lights, but from a core powered by African will? This project is more than engineering. It is theology. Because to bring light where there was darkness is not just infrastructure. It is scripture. It is a covenant between leadership and the people. And here's the message Traoré sent loud and clear. We do not need permission to power our own future. As the uranium turns to heat, and heat turns to steam, and steam spins the turbines that light the homes, every child in Burkina Faso will learn a different story about who we are and what we can become. In that moment, electricity won't be a privilege. It will be a right, a birthright. So the next time someone says Africa must wait, ask them this. Have you heard the latest about Captain Ibrahim? Because while others talk about change, Traoré is wiring it, welding it, and walking right into history. Gold. To the world, it glitters. But to Africa, it bleeds. For centuries, the soil of this continent has yielded more than just crops. It has yielded empires for others. From Ghana to Congo to Burkina Faso, our earth was rich, yet our people remained poor. Because while the hands digging the gold were black, the pockets it filled were not. That is until now. On July 9, 2025, just outside the capital of Ouagadougou, a construction site began to stir. Not for a foreign company, not for a multinational operation, but for Burkina Faso's first national gold refinery. A state-run complex designed to process 400 kilograms of gold per day, refine over 150 tons annually, and create over 5,000 jobs. All of it under African control. This wasn't just a factory. This was a firewall, a barrier between extraction and exploitation. For decades, Burkina Faso produced gold, 57 metric tons every year, yet most of it left unrefined, unrecorded, undervalued. Shipped raw to Switzerland, Dubai, London. Middlemen took their cut. Western certification labs got theirs. By the time it returned to the continent, if it ever did, it was unaffordable. But Captain Traoré drew a line. Only the wealth of our land, he declared, should build what will protect that wealth. That philosophy wasn't just poetic, it became policy. The new refinery, encircled by 24-hour surveillance, high concrete fencing, and a priority security zone, was designed not only for productivity but for protection. Embedded within the compound, gold grading units, packaging and export lines, certification labs, everything needed to bypass Europe entirely. No more flying gold to Switzerland for a stamp of approval. The stamp now bears the name of Burkina Faso, yet the impact isn't only economic. It's psychological. Every ounce refined locally rewires a generation's belief in possibility. For young metallurgists, geologists, logistics experts, this is no longer a dream you study abroad. This is a career you build at home. For every grandmother who watched her grandchildren leave for Europe chasing hope, this refinery is a promise. The jobs are coming back. And while gold glistens in the spotlight, another quiet revolution is taking shape, built not from precious metal, but from rock. On March 20th, 2025, the Sisino Mega Cement Factory opened its gates. Backed by Chinese investment but run by Burkina engineers, this plant now produces 2,000 tons of cement daily, with projections to hit 750,000 tons annually. Cement may not sparkle, but in the language of nations, it speaks of sovereignty. You cannot build roads, bridges, clinics, or schools without it. And yet most African countries still import it, from former colonizers no less, paying high prices for materials made from rocks that exist in their own mountains. The Sisino plant flips that equation. Sprawled across a 12-hectare site in the Liango Plateau, it uses 100% local raw materials, integrates packaging production lines, and employs over 400 Burkina citizens. And it doesn't stop at supply. The plant is a training hub, equipping youth in modern manufacturing, recycling cement bags, and even using solar energy to lower its environmental footprint. Traoré's vision here is surgical. By investing in material sovereignty, he's not just creating buildings, he's building a supply chain. A loop where extraction, processing, and construction all happen on African soil. No foreign bottlenecks, no delayed shipments, no debt traps. And this is the genius of integrated development. Gold pays for roads, cement builds them. One industry feeds the next. Nothing is isolated. Everything is coordinated. This vision runs counter to what most African leaders have accepted for decades. Nigeria pumps oil but imports fuel. Ghana mines gold but refines none. Kenya hosts tourists but imports tiles. All of this by design, a colonial design, a design where Africa remains the miner, the field, the raw source. But in Burkina Faso, a different design is unfolding. Picture it. Trucks loaded with refined gold moving not to airports but to a national vault where reserves grow and the currency stabilizes. Picture trains loaded with cement rolling out to build roads for trade, houses for health workers, schools for the next Sankara. Picture young men and women not running from their country, but returning to it. Because when you control the materials, you control the margins. When you control the margins, you control the money. And when you control the money, you control the future. And that is the essence of what Traoré is doing. He's turning resources into roots, not just selling what's under the ground, but building what stands above it. Gold, stone, cement. These aren't just materials. In the hands of a visionary, they become messages. Messages to the world. We are no longer your supplier. We are our own builders. Messages to our ancestors. What you lost, we are reclaiming. Messages to our children. This land is still rich, and this time, it's yours. If you want to control a people, you don't have to invade their land. Just control their roads, block their highways, raise the price of fuel, interrupt their shipments, then sit back and watch their economy crawl. For centuries, that's how Africa was managed, not by force but by fragmentation. No roads between farms and factories, no trains from villages to cities, no airports for trade, just for aid. But in 2025, Burkina Faso flipped the map. It didn't beg for logistics, it built them. And it all began with one number, 50,000. That's the number of kilometers of new roads launched under Traoré's National Infrastructure Program, the most ambitious in African history. Not 50,000 meters, 50,000 kilometers. By 2029, a crisscrossing network will connect not just cities, but destinies. This isn't just construction, it's connection. Roads that once ended in dust now stretch into possibility. Over 900 domestically operated machines, all run by Burkina engineers, not foreign contractors, are paving pathways between Ouagadougou, Bobo Dioulasso, the mining fields of the north, and the southern farmlands. These are not symbolic roads. They are arteries, moving people, moving goods, moving futures. Each kilometer not only breaks isolation, it builds circulation. Of crops to markets, of teachers to schools, of medicines to clinics. This is how a landlocked country becomes land-linked. But the roads are just the beginning. Because what good is a highway if it leads to nowhere? That's why, 30 kilometers northeast of the capital, another revolution rises from concrete and steel. Ouagadougou Donsin International Airport, West Africa's most advanced aviation hub, built for purpose, not prestige. With a 4,000-meter runway, it welcomes the largest global aircrafts, connecting Burkina Faso directly to the Middle East, Russia, and China. No stopovers in Paris, no detours through colonial airspace. Total investment? $200 million. Return? Incalculable. The airport will catalyze foreign investment, streamline cargo exports, and stimulate tourism growth, not for exotic safaris, but for trade fairs, tech summits, medical conferences. And behind every cargo shipment lies an ambition to export not just raw goods, but refined value. This is economic sovereignty in motion. Donsin Airport is more than a terminal. It's a statement. A statement that landlocked does not mean opportunity locked. A statement that Africa no longer waits for planes. It launches them. And yet, for Traoré, even that wasn't enough. Because what happens when the trucks that move your goods depend on fuel you do not control? When your transport is tied to the volatility of imported diesel, that's where the next layer of transformation emerges. ITWA electric vehicles, Burkina Faso's own domestic EV manufacturing program. You heard right. Electric cars made by Africans, for Africans, powered by the same solar energy that lights homes across the Sahel. No emissions, no fuel dependence, no foreign dictate on mobility. These EVs are more than green, they're revolutionary. They represent a future where renewable energy powers not just homes, but highways, where charging stations replace gas stations, where automotive parts are produced locally and jobs multiply in assembly lines once thought impossible on African soil. The ITWA program creates jobs not just for mechanics, but for engineers, software developers, electricians, logisticians. It births an entire ecosystem, from training centers to servicing workshops, from policy reform to public transport redesign. What's more, these vehicles are designed with regional integration in mind, meant to supply not just domestic fleets, but fleets across the alliance of Sahel States Confederation. This is not just mobility, it's diplomacy on wheels. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of this transformation is not in the technology, but in the psychology. Because when a child in rural Dori watches an electric bus glide past their village, they do not just see a vehicle, they see velocity. They see change moving at a speed Africa was told it could never reach. When a young apprentice shadows a mechanic at an EV plant outside Bobo Dioulasso, She isn't just learning to fix a car, she's learning to fix a system that once taught her people they must always import, always depend, always wait. And that is the quiet power of infrastructure. It doesn't shout. It doesn't trend on social media. But it whispers something deep and permanent into the soul of a nation. You can build this. And if you can build this, you can build anything. Let us be clear. This is not just about roads and runways. This is about reversing centuries of engineered isolation. During colonial times, infrastructure in Africa was never built to connect Africans to each other. It was built to extract resources and ship them out. Rubber from Congo, cocoa from Ghana, gold from Burkina Faso. Everything flowed out. Nothing returned. The veins ran one way, but Traoré has flipped the flow. Now, the veins run inward. They pump life across borders, across fields, across future generations. Consider this. A rural farmer now reaches a city market in hours, not days. A midwife transports supplies without risking her life on crumbling roads. A young entrepreneur ships locally made tech parts to Bamako or Niamey without needing to reroute through Europe. This is not convenience. This is capability. And capability, in the long arc of history, is what builds countries. And as the EVs charge silently under West African skies, as planes take off from the soil they once circled but never landed on, as road crews lay the final slabs on a once-forgotten trail, something else is charging too. A national confidence long buried beneath concrete imported from afar. Ask yourself, what is development really? Is it GDP figures in a report? Is it foreign aid in briefcases? Or is it this? A grandmother stepping off a new airport terminal to hug her grandson. A truck driver transporting solar panels from a Burkina factory to a Nigerian village. A student riding a silent electric scooter to a university once out of reach. That is what development looks like. That is what freedom feels like. And now, ask one more thing. What would happen if this model spread? If every African country said, we don't just want to move, we want to move on our own terms? Because the truth is, the world fears a connected Africa more than it fears a rich one. A rich Africa can be manipulated. But a connected Africa, through roads, air, and energy, cannot be stopped. Because a connected Africa thinks faster, trades faster, learns faster, and rises faster. So don't just watch this transformation, join it. If you're an African in the diaspora, share this story with your community. If you're an elder, tell the young that this time the revolution isn't in slogans, it's in streets. If you believe roads can be sacred, that runways can carry pride, that vehicles can be vessels of independence, then stay tuned. Because the next time someone tells you Africa is too behind, too broken, too burdened to move forward, just smile and say, you haven't seen Burkina Faso lately. In many corners of Africa, clean water and competent health care are still luxuries. For millions, they are the difference between life and death. In Burkina Faso, decades of neglect meant mothers walked miles for treated water. Children endured illness because clinics were scarce and under-equipped. But a new chapter is being written, one that claims water and health not as gifts, but rights. One of the largest undertakings is the Ziga 2 water supply project, northeast of Ouagadougou, the capital. The dam at Ziga was already there, but the infrastructure downstream had not kept pace with a growing population. Ziga 2 is designed to change that. It aims to increase clean water production and treatment capacity from the dam, to serve millions, about 6 million people in Ouagadougou and beyond. The system boosts output to around 22,500 liters per second, with storage capacity reaching 12,000 cubic meters and diameters of pipes ranging from 1/200 to 1,600 mm for the main water mains. GKW Consult.com+1. This isn't trickle by trickle. This is a surge of water into communities that have waited too long. Water shortages impact everything: sanitation, disease control, education. A child can't focus in class if she's dehydrated. A clinic can't sterilize tools if water's contaminated. Ziga, too, promises more than clean water. It promises dignity. Public health blossoms when water is safe. When mothers don't fear cholera, when infants don't suffer diarrhea, when industrial usage doesn't poison the wells. On the healthcare front, Burkina Faso has also mobilized massive efforts to build capacity. The plan includes regional university hospitals, such as the hospital in Gawa, on large sites with capacity for training doctors, researchers, and specialists. While not yet fully realized, these institutions are meant to serve as medical hubs for whole regions, reducing dependence on foreign medical travel. Local medical schools, nursing programs grow. Clinics once reserved for basic care are being upgraded to handle surgical emergencies, maternity care, neonatal units. To get perspective, WHO data for Burkina Faso shows a population of about 23 million people. Health expenditures low, life expectancy is modest. Mortality rates, especially for mothers and newborns, remain high. The difference between having a well-staffed hospital nearby and not having one is often a matter of hours. A weak referral system, poor transport, and lack of nearby specialists mean many need to travel far, and sometimes cannot afford to. Traoré's vision connects water and health. Ziga, too, provides enough clean water, which reduces waterborne diseases. Hospitals get reliable water supply, meaning surgeries are safer, medicines can be stored, hygiene is reliable. Combined with stronger health infrastructure, mobile clinics, regional hospitals, and more well-trained personnel, the idea is to make Burkina Faso a place where your zip code does not determine your lifespan. This development is radical because it shifts the narrative. From Africa needs help to Africa builds resilience. It redefines what survival looks like, not battling preventable deaths, but thriving with proper care. It centers health and clean water not at the margins, but as pillars of national dignity. So here's a question for you. When you see pictures of drought, of sick children, of clinics understocked, what if you imagine instead full taps, strong hospitals, mothers resting in proper wards? Isn't that what justice demands? Because Burkina Faso might be making that image real. When you hear space program, you may think of America, Russia, China, maybe India. But today, if you open the skies over West Africa, you'll see something else rising. A signal, a satellite, a future. On the launchpad of African intellect stands BurkinaSat-1, the first satellite project of Burkina Faso, born not from external pressure, but internal vision. This isn't a vanity project. It's not about status. It's about sovereignty, digital, environmental, agricultural, and educational. The satellite's functions are rooted in practicality: climate data collection, crop monitoring, telecommunication networks, and disaster management. What it means is this: farmers in the Sahel won't have to guess rainfall patterns. Schools in remote towns won't lose signal during a lesson. Governments won't need to rely on Western institutions for weather alerts or mapping. They will look to BurkinaSat-1. This is the true meaning of independence. Not just control of land, but mastery of the skies above it. The implications are profound. Satellite data informs everything from food security to military preparedness. It enables telemedicine, distance education, precise irrigation systems, and even cross-border coordination of disease tracking. This single program gives Burkina Faso a voice in the technological conversations of the 21st century, a voice long silenced, now reawakened. And the project isn't run by foreign hands. It's coordinated through partnerships with non-Western space agencies and supported by training of young Burkina engineers. Indigenous expertise is growing. Young Africans are coding, calibrating, commanding missions from control rooms in Ouagadougou. Some of them were toddlers when the country barely had internet. Now they operate Earth-orbiting equipment. And that brings us to something just as powerful, not orbiting in space but grounded in history, the Thomas Sankara Mausoleum. In the heart of Ouagadougou, under red clay and beside the waving flags of a proud republic, Captain Traoré has inaugurated a national memorial that does more than honor the past. It reclaims it. It reweaves it into the national psyche. Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary icon who once declared, "He who feeds you, controls you," was assassinated alongside 12 comrades. For years, their memory was buried, denied, distorted. But no more. The new Sankara Memorial Complex is not just a tomb. It is a museum, a school, a stage, and a seed. It teaches Pan-African values. It hosts national celebrations. It generates heritage tourism. And most importantly, it inspires a generation to see revolution not as a thing of the past, but a responsibility for the present. What's brilliant about this memorial is its integration. It's not a frozen monument. It is alive with programming. Youth groups attend workshops. Elders share oral histories. Scholars debate the future of African governance while children trace the faces of martyrs with their fingertips. It's tactile. It's sacred. It's strategic. And it connects perfectly with the satellite. Because both are about narrative. One says, "We remember." The other says, "We see." Together, they form a new sensory system for the country. One eye on the stars, one foot in the soil. One rooted in memory. One reaching for possibility. And in this duality lies Traoré's genius. He does not choose between past and future. He binds them. He tells us that to go forward we must look back with clarity, not shame. That we must launch, not just rockets, but identity. The satellite is proof that African technology can lead. The mausoleum is proof that African memory can guide. And together, they whisper something new to every Burkinabe child. You belong to a people who not only dreamed, but built. Who not only suffered, but stood back up. Who not only lost leaders, but became them. That is the new Burkina Faso. That is the latest news from a land once ignored. That is the signal sent not just to satellites, but to spirits, to sons, to daughters, to all of us who still believe in Africa's mind, Africa's memory, and Africa's rise. Burkina Faso latest news. We're building heaven into earth and aiming it skyward. Brothers and sisters across the globe, when was the last time the world turned its gaze to Burkina Faso and saw not a crisis, but a compass? Not chaos, but coordination? Not poverty, but power? In just 3 years, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has done more than govern. He has galvanized. He has not begged for foreign investors to fix what colonialism broke. He has not waited for Western aid packages with strings attached. He has not knelt. He has built 10 mega projects, each one stitched into the other. Roads feeding factories, factories fueling exports, airports linking futures, satellites scanning fields, hospitals saving lives, EVs rolling clean, water flowing steady, gold staying home, and through it all, a mausoleum that keeps the fire of Sankara burning. This is not a dream. This is not a trailer. This is real. This is Captain Ibrahim latest news. But more than that, it is a blueprint. A framework for every African nation to learn from. A living proof that visionary leadership, rooted in self-reliance, not servitude, can create systems that serve the people. Not pockets, not power, but people. And now we ask you as elders, as children of the diaspora, as watchers of history, what will you do with this story? Will you share it? Will you speak it? Will you sow it in the ears of our youth so they may know what is possible? Not in theory, but in cement and circuitry. Will you remind them that Burkina Faso latest news is not about conflict but construction? That Captain Ibrahim latest news is not about promises, but proof. If this story moved something in your chest, don't scroll past. Like, share, speak, subscribe, because they hid our history long enough. Let's speak our future out loud. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next story. The kind they still don't want you to hear. Africa Rise.